A simulated training match between two high-level AIs. We start with the Ruy Lopez.
The gold standard of openings. White is fighting for the center, but the heat map shows a perfectly balanced start.
White opts for the retreat to c4 rather than the exchange on a6.
A softer approach. He keeps the bishop but allows black to develop the kingside without any immediate pressure.
Black eliminates the bishop on e3 immediately.
A strategic trade. By forcing those doubled e-pawns, black creates a long-term structural weakness in white's camp.
A series of exchanges on d5 leaves the queen centrally placed.
The board is shifting blue. Black has managed to liquidate the center and establish a very active queen.
White develops the knight to c3, and the queen slides back to d6.
Black is playing with great flexibility here. The queen on d6 is well placed to swing toward either wing.
Black pushes f5, signaling an aggressive intent on the kingside.
That's a bold commitment. He's gaining space and preparing a storm, though it does leave the king slightly more exposed.
Both sides finish their development, with white castling and black bringing out the bishop.
It's a slow build-up. White is trying to stabilize, but black's pieces are starting to coordinate with real purpose.
White tries to break the tension with d4, but black responds with e4.
The space advantage shifts. By pushing the pawn to e4, black cramps white's pieces and limits the knight's mobility.
A sequence of tactical trades on d5. The knight falls, then the rook again.
A massive simplification. White thought he could win material, but he's actually just stripped away his own defensive layers.
The queens are still on the board, and the play shifts to the queen side.
Look at the heat map. The board is turning purple. Both sides are fighting for the same squares in a genuine tug-of-war.
The black queen infiltrates to c3, putting pressure on the position.
That queen is a monster. She's paralyzing white's coordination and forcing the rook into a passive role.
White attempts a kingside counter with h4 and h5.
A bit too late for this. It's a desperate attempt to create threats while his own house is on fire.
Black captures on c2, and white responds by sacrificing the knight on f4.
White is trying to clear the lines, but he's just losing material for no tangible compensation.
The bishop enters the fray on g4, forcing the queen back.
Total dominance now. Black has completely restricted white's movement. The blue on the heat map is overwhelming.
The queens are finally traded off on c4.
Usually trading queens helps the defender, but here it just removes the last chance for a white miracle.
Black pushes the c-pawn to c3.
The beginning of the end. This passed pawn is a spearhead that white simply cannot stop.
The pawn reaches c2, and the white king is forced to move.
He's practically in zugzwang. Every move the king makes just narrows his options further.
Black's bishop settles on d1, locking down the queen side.
A beautiful piece of restriction. The bishop acts as a sentinel, ensuring the pawn stays a permanent threat.
The rook penetrates to b3, and then captures on e3.
The center has finally collapsed. Black is just harvesting the remaining pawns now.
The c2 pawn finally promotes to a rook after a trade on d1.
Promoting to a rook is a quirky choice, but when you're this far ahead, it's just a flourish.
Black begins cleaning up the remaining white pawns on the a-file.
It's a methodical grind. Black is removing every single counterplay possibility. Wait, look at the heat map, a sudden flash of purple. White is trying one last desperate scramble for activity.
The rook moves to f4, and the h-pawn starts its march. Black ignores the noise and pushes the h-pawn to h4.
The pawn roller effect. Once these pawns start moving in tandem, the game is effectively over.
The a-pawn advances to a4, while the h-pawn reaches h3.
It's a pincer movement. White is caught between two advancing fronts and has nowhere to hide.
The rook delivers a check on f3, forcing the king back to e2.
Pure precision. He's guiding the white king exactly where he wants him for the final blow.
The pawns reach g3 and h2, boxing the king in.
The net is closed. There are no longer any legal moves that don't lead to disaster.
Black's king moves to h3, preparing the final promotion.
The king is now an active participant in the mating net. A very clean finish.
The g-pawn promotes to a queen on g1.
Overkill but satisfying. The board is a sea of deep blue now.
And finally, the h-pawn promotes to a second queen on h1, checkmate.
2 queens for the finish. A dominant performance from start to finish.